They can't get jobs because there are no jobs. Because China has our jobs and Mexico has our jobs. They all have our jobs. We are going to make America wealthy again.
Job outsourcing is when a company sends its functions and jobs overseas for cheaper labor costs, reduced taxes, and increased sales. Job outsourcing was formally identified as a business strategy in 1989. Businesses began this strategy as a cost-saving measurement and one that improved their finances. However, since the year 2000, the U.S. has lost 5 million manufacturing jobs.
Companies such as IBM, AIG, Amazon, Verizon, and Pepsi outsource in order to lower the cost of goods so that their companies make a higher profit while remaining competitive against other firms.
I work for AIG International, which is a multinational corporation with offices around the world.
What is your job title?
I'm a global release manager for the SAP environment for AIG.
Has your career always been affected by outsourcing?
Not always, however, in the last, I would say, 10 to 15 years, it has been, with the globalization of most companies that I've worked for.
How does outsourcing affect your career?
Well, I worked for 10 years for another company, Automatic Data Processing, where that they had decided to take my position and move it overseas to India, and therefore I had a reduction in force, otherwise known as a RIF, or commonly known as laid off.
What is your opinion on outsourcing?
I think it's good to a point. However, what's happening is the United States, the federal government, gives corporations tax benefits if they move their positions to other countries like India, Malaysia, the Philippines. And what's happening is that because they can get cheaper labor in those areas, these jobs are going away and therefore putting Americans on the unemployment rolls.
Would it be more beneficial to bring jobs back into the United States?
Yes, I believe so. What would happen is, of course, we'd keep more people off the unemployment rolls. And I think a lot of the U.S. clientele, the major companies that AIG works for, ADP, who was a former employer of mine, they work for, they feel that if they can contact someone that's based in the United States, then that would be beneficial to them.
Where labor is lower cost. You look at Mexico, where it's about 80% cheaper to manufacture a car there than it is in the United States.
If we stop outsourcing, we will produce a more successful economy that will create 25 million more jobs over the next decade. Over the last 7 years, 14 million more people have left the labor force. This is currently the lowest labor force participation rate since the 1970s. 1 in 5 American households do not have a single family member in the labor force.
You can lose control of your intellectual property. In parts of the world where outsourcing is cheapest, there's often little respect for corporate secrets. Patents are unenforceable, and many companies discover copycat products after deployment.
It can result in low-quality, brand-damaging products. Many firms that provide outsourcing quickly cut the quality of component parts in order to increase their margins. Eventually, customers who are accustomed to believing your brand promise begin to notice that your once great products are suddenly crappy.
You may be supporting slave labor or child labor. Offshoring agreements typically involve a long supply chain that may very well include companies with labor practices which, if publicized in the United States, could destroy your company's reputation. Do you really want your firm associated with little kids who lose their fingers while working in unsafe conditions?
You might create massive environmental degradation. This is because it's cheaper to manufacture abroad when the companies there are often cutting costs by simply dumping their toxic chemicals. Someday, somebody will get stuck with the cleanup bill. It could be your firm.
You may be empowering political thugs. Make no mistake about it, communist countries are run by thugs who suppress and shoot protesters, lay claim to border wars, and support other worse drugs. Do you really want that to be your brand name?
It makes you vulnerable to energy spikes. While outsourcing reduces labor, it also increases transportation costs. If the future brings sharp increases in oil prices, paying the extra transportation cost could be a disproportionate impact on your bottom line.
Your product might end up killing people. There have been several well-publicized examples of dangerous products entering the U.S. from abroad. The likelihood of this happening is acute when offshoring in companies where the press is not free to report corporate-caused deaths.
You're helping to destroy your own country. It's one thing to celebrate on the 4th of July, but it's quite another to help to gut the manufacturing base of your homeland. Do you really want the rest of the country to become like Detroit? Because that's where things are headed.
Everybody is doing it. When everybody is following the same strategy, it can't possibly create a competitive advantage for anybody. If you really want to differentiate yourself, why not figure out a better way to keep your margins high than by simply imitating your competitors?
Trump did not elaborate just what the consequences would be, but during the election campaign, he frequently threatened U.S. firms that his administration will put a 35% import tariff on goods made by American manufacturers who move jobs offshore. He is trying to bring jobs back to the U.S.
There could be a law saying that every time a company announces plans to send 100 or more jobs overseas, its executives would be required to attend a public hearing that a local member of Congress would hold in the community where the jobs would be lost. And if a company announces plans to outsource 500 or more jobs, there would not be just that local hearing, but a hearing on Capitol Hill before a congressional committee. This would be done in order to make America great again.